Okay, I'm going to do a new video today. In this video, I'm going to talk about my theory about what happened to MH370. In the previous videos I did, I basically analyzed the data. I looked at the witness data, the radar data, and the Inmarsat data. In those videos, I basically did an analysis of that data. But I did not get into too much theory because what I wanted to show you in those videos was just my analysis of the data. Now, in this video, I'm going to talk to you about my theory as to what I think that data is telling us and what I believe happened to this plane. So, the reason I think MH370 was hijacked was because of the cargo. And specifically, let me get to here, this cargo here, 89 kilograms of cargo that was added to the cargo flight list after takeoff. This cargo apparently got loaded onto MH370 at the last minute, and it did not go through any radar scans. Apparently, this was avoided, and this information was discovered through Florence Duchesne, who's a reporter, plus Guylain Waterloo, who is a French national whose family was on board MH370, and he learned of this mysterious load of 89 kilograms that had been added to the flight list after takeoff. And so there's a lot of suspicion about that cargo. It was labeled as radio equipment, and it was put on board at the last minute, bypassing airport security scanners. Very suspicious. So this is the reason I think MH370 was being hijacked. Now the question is, where did the cargo come from and what was in it? About a week after MH370 went missing, this report started to circulate online. Now, the source of this report is very questionable. Sorcha Fowl. And there's a lot of sensational accusations in the report, but it has a ring of truth to it that needs to be looked at. Now, what this article talks about is a new report circulating in the Kremlin, prepared by the main intelligence directorate of the General Staff of the Armed Forces, GRU. This was in the Russian intelligence, and this report was circulating, talking about how MH370 was captured and then diverted to Diego Garcia by the U.S. Navy. Very interesting report. But what I found really intriguing about this report was that, according to this report, Malaysia Airlines was scheduled a passenger flight Kuala Lumpur on 8th of March this year. Interesting to note, the report says that Flight 370 was already under GRU surveillance after it received a highly suspicious cargo load that had been traced to the Indian Ocean near the Republic of Seychelles, and where it was previously been on board the U.S. flagship container ship MV Maersk Alabama. What first aroused the GRU's suspicion regarding the MV Maersk Alabama, this report continues, was that within 24 hours of offloading this highly suspicious cargo load bound for the Malaysia Airlines, the two highly trained U.S. Navy SEALs assigned to protect it, Mark Daniel Kennedy and Keith Reynolds, were found dead under suspicious circumstances. Now, this part of the story I know is true, and I'll get to that in a second. Both Kennedy and Reynolds, this report says, were employed by the Virginia-based maritime security firm the Trident Group, which was founded by the U.S. Navy Special Operations personnel, SEALs, and senior U.S. naval surface warfare officers, and has long been known by the GRU to protect vital transfers of both atomic and biological materials throughout the world. Now, these guys here, I'm going to bring them up here. Let me just These guys here, this is the Marsk, Alabama. It's these two guys here, Jeffrey Reynolds and Mark Kennedy. They were both found dead on this ship, Marsk, Alabama, and here's a report of what happened to them. Apparently, the official story is these guys went out drinking, partied with a couple of hookers, and ended up killing themselves with a heroin overdose. Now, the problem with this story is that their families, as you can see here in this report, demanded an investigation into their deaths. There's no way that their families believe that these guys committed suicide and injected themselves with heroin. They were never known to take strong drugs. They were U.S. Navy SEALs, ex-Navy SEALs. They treated their bodies like temple. Yes, maybe they drank beer, maybe they smoked a bit of pot. Maybe they weren't the perfect husbands, but to say that they killed themselves with heroin is, to me, a far stretch and very suspicious. And so, what brings up the question to me is, what were they protecting on board that ship? And so, these guys worked for this company here, Trident Group, which is a company which uh, provides maritime security for the U.S. government, and it's comprised mostly of ex-military U.S. Navy personnel who provide this security. And so these guys are known to transport very classified, sensitive material for the U.S. military and provide security protection for them on board ships like the Marsk, Alabama, when their cargo is being transported. So this started to raise questions for me. But then in 2016, I came across this report, which I found extremely interesting. It talks about how pirates hacked into shipping company servers to identify booty. In other words, in this report, they describe an incident where hackers hacked into a U.S. shipping company database, retrieved sensitive information about the cargo, and the hackers were passed that information on to pirates, and the pirates went on board this ship and they stole cargo, and they knew exactly what container, exactly where on the ship and what container this valuable cargo was in. This is what this incident is describing. So what I believe happened on and I believe that this incident is describing the incident that happened on the Marsk, Alabama. It does not say so directly, but I believe it does. And what I believe happened, and this is speculation, of course, but what I believe happened is very sensitive technology that was on board that ship heading to a drone base in St. Chiles, Africa, was stolen on board the Marsk, Alabama. I believe uh, if you read the story about what happened to those Navy SEALs, they were out partying that night. They were last seen at a club with two hookers, and then the next morning they're dead. I believe those two hookers murdered Jeffrey Reynolds and Mark Kennedy, and they allowed these pirates to get on board that ship and go and get sensitive cargo off that ship. They knew exactly where to go, what container was in, where it was on the ship, and they just took that cargo. Question is, what was in the cargo? Well, if you go to, let me pull this up here right now. Okay, what was in the cargo? I believe what was in the cargo was uh, possibly a command and control unit for a U.S. drone Predator drone system. Uh, Now, let me just go here. This is a map showing all the drone bases that are in Africa by the U.S. Operated by the U.S. military, and there's quite a few drone bases within Africa. And as you can see, there's one here in St. Chiles, Africa. Now, that's where the incident on the Marsk, Alabama happened. Now, the U.S. in the early 2000s, during the Iraq-Afghanistan war, invested billions of dollars, billions, to develop their global drone network. And so they've expanded on bases, they've expanded on satellite communications. Uh, they've invested billions of dollars in this network. The last thing they would want is for the Chinese to get their hands on a piece of equipment like this. Because if they got their hands on a piece of a command and control unit for a U.S. drone system, in theory, they could back engineer it and they could retrieve all the necessary encryption codes, command codes, frequencies that are being used to control the drones. And the last thing the U.S. military would want is for the Chinese to hack into their drone network and be able to control their own drones against them. So you can be sure if this was stolen off the Marsk, Alabama, there is no way the U.S. government would have allowed the Chinese to smuggle that into China. No way. So I think this is the reason that MH370 was hijacked, because I believe the Chinese were stealing drone technology. They had previous cases where they had attempted in a woman in Florida working for the Chinese government got arrested for trying to buy a I think it was a drone, U.S. drone illegally on the black market. So the Chinese have been actively interested in getting their hands on U.S. drone technology, and I think what they wanted to do with this cargo was they would pay big money if someone would steal that cargo off board the ship, and the plan was to, let me back up here. I believe after the cargo was stolen off the Marsk, Alabama, I believe that cargo it was brought to Malaysia by boat by the pirates who stole it, and I believe they sold the cargo to I believe those 23 free scale engineers, and I believe the cargo was brought back to the Chinese embassy and kept there until it was put on board MH370. So I believe the engineers who were on board MH370 who worked for the company Freescale were also working for the Chinese Defense Ministry, and I believe they were trying to back engineer that technology, and they were trying to smuggle that piece of equipment into China. And I think what they calculated was the safest way to bring it into China was to put it on board a passenger jet, figuring that the U.S. government would not harm innocent civilians. And I think the Chinese miscalculated there, and so I think they did. And I think what the U.S. did at this point is they launched the plan to get back their cargo. So, anyways, I think we can't say for certain what was in the cargo, but there's certainly a highly suspicious connection here with the Marsk, Alabama, that I think this is where the cargo came from, and I think it was related to drone technology that the U.S. government did not want falling in the hands of the Chinese. And so I think what the U.S. did at this point was to launch a plan, a covert military operation in order to retrieve their cargo. Okay, so what I believe happened is the CIA uh, planned a covert military operation to hijack MH370 and retrieve back its cargo, but they also wanted to capture the 23 free-scale engineers who had access to that cargo. Not only did they want them, they wanted their laptops, their cell phones, any zip drives they may have. They wanted to make sure that they got back the cargo and the people who had access to the cargo. So I think that was the reason why they didn't launch like a ground assault to recapture the cargo. What they wanted to do was let them get all on the plane at the same time with the cargo, and then all they had to do was do a remote hijacking. Now, I'll explain that in a sec. So the plan was to divert the plane to the Maldives, and while the plane was being diverted to the Maldives, they had decoys sent up in order to create the false illusion of authentic data and make it appear that MH370 flew somewhere else and not the Maldives. It was a way for them to cover their ass. So basically, what I believe happened was that Agari, the plane was remotely hijacked. Now, this may have been done through satellite control or through maybe an AWACS plane that was able to fly above the MH370 and hack into the satellite data network. Essentially, if they send a signal to the aircraft, the theory is that they can send a command code to make the aircraft work in what's known as with Boeing Honeywell uninterruptible autopilot. In other words, it takes control away from the pilot, and they're able to control the airplane through remote satellite control. And this technology has been around has been known to exist for some time. And there's been some very good research done on this by a captain named Dan Hanley, who's a former United Airlines captain. And he's a B-77 captain. And he believes this technology exists today and is embedded on commercial aircrafts. Frightening thought to think about, but that's what he believes, and I think he's right. So I think that MH370 was remotely hijacked at the waypoint Agari. It was diverted to the Maldives. And what they did was, as MH370 was flying at low altitudes towards the Maldives, a fighter jet, which I believe took off from an aircraft carrier in the South China Sea, ascended onto radar here and flew across the Malaysian peninsula. So this is what we see in the first part of the radar data here. This is altitude. This is a fighter jet that we're seeing. And if we go back here, after the fighter jet flies through the Straits of Malacca, I believe it descends off radar and it lands on another aircraft carrier right here in the Straits of Malacca. And as that's going on, the B-77 decoy takes off from Air Force Base Butterworth near Penang, and it flies out over the Straits of Malacca, and it ascends on radar here. And so this plane will transmit the Inmarsat data, which will make the authorities believe that MH370 flew out to the southern Indian Ocean. And it was just being used as a signal drone, a decoy, in order to create the illusion of false data or the illusion of authentic data, but misleading data. So here's the radar, as I talked about briefly before in one of my videos. Basically, this is the fighter jet, this is the decoy, and this is MH370 flying along this low-flying flight path. And this is the altitude data showing the decoy as it's leaving radar at 1822 at 29,500 feet. So the plan was to hijack the plane and use decoys to create the authentic but misleading data. And here's a report that says that, let me bring this up a little larger. It says that there was 2 amphibious assault ships that were conducting military operations when Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 went down. Now, where exactly were they, and that I don't know, but there was military activity going on that night. So it's very likely that that activity was a part of this military operation, in my opinion. Now, this is where I believe MH370 flew to the Maldives. And I explained this flight path in my previous video, so I'm not going to go into it too much. But essentially, the plane was flown to the Maldives. It landed there, I believe, at Mali Airport. The passengers, crew, unwanted luggage, and cargo was taken off board the plane, and they were put on board a military transport plane and brought to Diego Garcia. The plane was then refueled, and it continued on with, I believe, the secret cargo on board, which got dropped off here at Thai Marifushi Airport. I believe the cargo was heading back to St. Chiles, Africa, and it wasn't going back to Diego Garcia. So after they dropped off the cargo here, they just flew the plane back to the Straits of Malacca, and then they ditched it over here in the Andaman Sea. This is a good place to ditch it because it would take the longest time for debris to show up in Africa from this area. So it was a good place to ditch the plane because the debris would all head south from that area. So MH370 goes west, and the decoy, well, that flies out into the southern Indian Ocean, and it transmits the Inmarsat data, which makes us all believe that MH370 flew out here, but it's just a decoy. And so it created the perfect deception and cover for their mission. I also believe that when the plane was flying in this area, the UAP video, which I believe is still real, was filmed in this area here and shows the plane turning south. But it did not go through a porthole, of course. It kept flying south, and the porthole in the video is, in my opinion, just a video effect. Anyways, so I think they did this to create the very perfect diversion. Here's where they landed the plane at Mali Airport. I believe they came in from this way, from the south, and kept the plane at the north end of the runway away from the terminal building. They probably had another plane waiting for them to take the passengers to Diego Garcia, and they just had to refuel the plane here. They would be on the ground between about 3:40 a.m. and I estimate 5:30 a.m. They would have been out of there by dawn. At this time, I believe some phone calls started to ring because they were connecting to the cell network in the Maldives, and I believe one of the passengers, a father on board, was able to call his daughter from this airport. How he did that, I don't know, but there's a report of an incoming call, and I believe it was done from this airport. Okay. Yeah, another thing I want to mention here is, let me see if I can bring this up here. Okay. Yeah, so now this is a document I received. It's about a draft for what's called a SOFA agreement, status of forces access, and it's the status of forces agreement, and it's between the Maldives and the United States. And what this agreement does is, that in the case of military activity, it gives the U.S. the ability to use airports in the Maldives for their military purposes. It even gives them immunity from any criminal prosecution. So this is an agreement the U.S. military has with the Maldives, and I believe they invoked that agreement in order to land the plane at. Let me just bring this up here. In order to land the plane in the Maldives, this SOFA agreement gives the U.S. forces the capability to access and use Maldivian airports and seaports for military purposes and operations when deemed necessary. If MH370 was hijacked in a military operation by the U.S., they may have invoked this agreement with the Maldives government and needed to use two of their airports, Mali and Thai Marifushi, to land MH370. I believe that's what they did. They were able to use these airports for a covert military action. And this is a picture of Thai Airport. It's a very short runway, but it's possible for a B-77, which is at base weight, to be able to make a landing there, and I believe it can also make a takeoff if it's a base weight B-77. So I believe the cargo, the secret cargo, was dropped off at this airport and brought back to St. Chiles, Africa, where it was stolen off the Maersk, Alabama. And so if I go back, let me go back here a bit. Okay, okay. They fly the plane out to the Maldives. They unload it. After they get what they want, they ditch the plane over here, and the decoy flies south to the Indian Ocean, and that gets eventually ditched in the southern Indian Ocean. And this is where I believe MH370 ended up off, where its debris field was last spotted off the coast of Sumatra. And if you look at my previous videos, I explain in detail how that happened. So I'm convinced that this is where MH370 was ditched, and I'm convinced that down here in the southern Indian Ocean is where the decoy was ditched, and that's why there seems to be two aircraft debris fields that were spotted in satellite imagery in the Indian Ocean in March of 2014, because two planes crashed at that time. Now, okay, I'm the decoy crashed in the southern Indian Ocean. MH370 crashed off of Sumatra. So once you understand that, then the question becomes after that is, well, okay, the U.S. got back their cargo. They got the 23 Freescale engineers, but what did they do with the passengers and crew? So the that's the hardest question to answer. But the best answer I can give you, and you can take it for what it's worth, is this answer here. This is a picture that was allegedly sent by a passenger named Philip Wood, who was on board MH370. The interesting thing about this picture, it was taken on March 18th, and it was uploaded to, I think it was a 4-channel website blog. I'm not 100% sure. But the excess data in the image says that the image was taken here at Diego Garcia. And the text that was associated with the image said, the picture posted with the following: I have been held hostage by unknown military personnel after my flight was hijacked, blindfolded. I work for IBM, and I have managed to hide in my cell phone in my ass during the hijack. I have been separated from the rest of the passengers, and I am in a cell. My name is Philip Wood. I think I've been drugged as well. I cannot think clearly. Now, you can take this for what you want. Some people discredit this information and say, look, anyone can exit a photo and change the exit data, which is true, but there's no proof it was done to this image. I've seen no proof that it was done to this image. So how do we know that this image was edited? So if it's true, then it's very revealing. I mean, it indicates he was still alive on March 18th. So that's the best answer I can give anyone as to what do I think happened to the passengers. My belief is they ended up here at Diego Garcia, and what happened to them after that, I have no clue. I have no clue if they're still alive. I have no clue if they even died on that plane or are dead. I have absolutely no clue other than this piece of evidence here. Okay, so I believe uh, this covert military action has been classified by the U.S. government. What you're seeing here is a Freedom of Information Act request, a FOIA request, that was sent in, dated 16th of April 2014. This is a response to a request by a Dr. Orly Tates in Santa Margarita, California. and he received this response to his request for information regarding MH370. And they told him in their response was, "We have determined that the fact of the existence or non-existence of the materials you requested is currently and properly classified matter in accordance with Executive Order 13526 as set forth in subparagraph C of Section 1.4. So why is this classified? Well, this is why it's classified. This is Section 1.4, subparagraph C, intelligence activities including covert action, intelligence sources or methods, or cryptology. I believe MH370 is classified because of a covert action. It was hijacked in a covert military action. And so I believe this is why it's been classified. And people recently have made requests on this and have been denied requests as well. So why is matters pertaining to a civilian aircraft accident a classified matter within the U.S. government? That's a good question to ask. I believe it's because they're covering up a covert military action. So who is ultimately responsible for the disappearance of this plane? This guy, the guy on the left, President Barack Obama. I believe he ordered the CIA and U.S. Department of Defense to hijack that plane and retrieve its cargo in order to protect the national security of the United States. I think he had a very difficult decision to do there, but I think he gave the order to hijack that plane. And the person on the right, ex-Prime Minister Najib, I believe he helped his golf buddy and friend cover this up. And he came into a lot of money afterwards through a big scandal. He went to jail for it. And I believe that the money he was getting from this this fund, it was a workers' fund of some sort. I forget the name of the fund, but he was siphoning off money out of that fund, and it was they did some investigation into that fund. I think it was called 1MDB fund, if I remember correctly, and they found out that there was a number of companies in the U.S. that were depositing or transferring money into that fund, and he was siphoning out money out of that fund. I think that was his payoff for help covering up what his friend and golf buddy Barack Obama, President Barack Obama, had to do. Now, I am not judging or making a political statement here. I honestly think President Obama was a decent human being, but what is hard for me to accept in my theory is what happened to those passengers and crew. What happened to them? I can rationalize everything else in my theory, no problem. I can see the rationale, but the problem with the passengers and moral question there is very difficult for me to comprehend. In any event, I think this is my theory on what I believe happened to MH370, and it's based on my analysis of the data, including all the data, witness data, satellite imagery data, reverse drift analysis, barnacle studies, Inmarsat data, radar data. I studied that all throughout the years, and this is my best theory I could come up with that rationalizes and explains all the data and rationalizes into a meaningful theory. Anyways, I'll let you go now, and this is my theory. And if you want to make any comments or ask me questions, you can reach me on Twitter. Anyways, I'll let you go for now. Bye.